Random House Audio presents The Smoke at Dawn, a novel of the Civil War, by Jeff Shaara. Read for you by Paul Michael. To the Reader. This novel is the third in what will become a four-book set, taking place in the Western theater of the Civil War. As with the first two in the series, I follow several historical figures by telling you the story through their eyes, from their own points of view. Though the history is accurate and every event happened as portrayed, because there are thoughts and dialogue, this has to be described as fiction. This story deals with the critical campaign around Chattanooga in the fall of 1863. Consistent throughout this entire series is the voice of Union General William T. Sherman. Here as well are Ulysses S. Grant and George Thomas. On the Confederate side are two widely different personalities, Confederate Commanding General Braxton Bragg and Major General Patrick Cleburne. Also in this story is a voice I introduced in the first two books, that of Private Fritz Dutchy Bauer. I have come to accept that no story like this can be told effectively without focusing on the man with the musket, who truly determines if the decisions of the generals will succeed or fail. In every case, my research takes me back to this time, to the thought processes of the characters themselves. I'm often asked about my research, and many times I've been asked, "How do you write the dialogue?" There is no easy answer to that. The acknowledgments section in the print edition of this book offers a glimpse into the original sources, including diaries, memoirs, and collections of letters that offer enormous assistance in my efforts to find out just who these people are, to hear the voices. My job, then, is to tell you what I hear. That might sound a little mystical, or a little schizophrenic, and I don't believe I'm either. The goal, ultimately, is to put words in the mouths of memorable and historically important people. If those words are not accurate to who that person was, either by deed or personality, the dialogue will come across as counterfeit. First to me, and most certainly to you. That's the magic of the research, and, I hope, the magic of the writing process. It has been extremely gratifying to hear from so many readers, either through my website or on the road throughout my book signing tours, who might have had no real interest in this particular topic — not everyone is a Civil War buff — but who have been drawn into these stories. One point I emphasize to every audience I speak to is that this is not a history book. Nothing like what you were required to read in high school. My father, Michael Shaara, taught his creative writing students at Florida State that if you have any interest in writing a story, you must start and end with exactly that, the story. That's a lesson I've taken to heart for the past 20 years. I am under no illusions that if my father was still alive, many of the books I've written would have been his stories to tell. His masterpiece, The Killer Angels, is now 40 years old and is currently in its 112th printing. He died in 1988, having no idea what he had left behind. The 150th anniversary of the Civil War has already been commemorated in all 50 states. I'm honored to have been a part of many of those events. Unfortunately, this 4-year anniversary has overshadowed other milestones from our history, notably the bicentennial of the War of 1812 and, in 2014, the centennial of the start of World War I. With all due respect to those whose interests lie outside of the Civil War, the attention this particular anniversary has received is, to me, a sign of the power that the Civil War still holds over us. There are enormous numbers of descendants of the veterans of that war who still honor their ancestry in very graphic and impressive ways. I have been caught completely off guard by the extraordinary emotions that pour through many events involving both the sons of Union and sons of Confederate veterans. But even those with no personal connection at all continue to be drawn to the great fields where the war was fought, most notably Gettysburg. I was amazed how many visitors to the 150th anniversary events in July 2013 were making the trip to Gettysburg for the first time, and how many of those insisted they would return. I am a rabid supporter of battlefield preservation, and that kind of ongoing interest and passion is reassuring. As entertaining or enlightening as any battlefield might be, for me, the ground is an essential part of the research. As I mention in the introduction to my nonfiction Battlefields book, as the zoo is not the jungle, so the museum is not the battlefield. If any of these stories and characters are appealing to you, I implore you to see these places for yourself. You might find, as I did many years ago, that you are captured by what happened there. And perhaps you might sit down and write a book. Jeff Shaara, May 2014. Introduction. By mid-1863, the Civil War has turned decidedly in favor of the Union. In July of that year, Federal forces win two monumental victories at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and Vicksburg, Mississippi. Gettysburg is far closer to the great media centers of the day, including Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Richmond. Thus, most of the public's attention is drawn to the events there, including the astounding casualty count. More than 50,000 soldiers are killed, wounded, or missing after a 3-day fight that many now believe will prevent Southern forces under Robert E. Lee from ever again challenging any Union army for dominance on the field. With so much newspaper and photographic coverage of Gettysburg, overlooked by many is what the capture of the Mississippi River town of Vicksburg has done to Southern fortunes. Whereas Gettysburg crushes Lee's hopes to end the war by posing a threat to Washington, D.C., the North's victory at Vicksburg accomplishes three things that in the long term have a far greater impact. With unobstructed control of the Mississippi River, Federal armies can now travel freely from the great cities of the North and Midwest directly to the Gulf of Mexico. Supplies and equipment can be fed to Federal forces now in nearly every part of the South, and there is very little that Confederate armies can do about it. Worse for the Confederacy, they lose the enormously valuable lifeline of men and resources from those states beyond the river, including Texas, Arkansas, and most of Louisiana. But there is another notable story told at Vicksburg, as important to the outcome of the war as the battle itself. It is the ascendancy of the Federal commander there, Ulysses S. Grant. For 2 miserable years, Abraham Lincoln has struggled to find a general, any general, with the ability to confront his Confederate counterparts and win. Though the Northern armies have on occasion been victorious, none of the Federal commanders can drive home those successes in a way that brings the war to an end. Some, especially in the East, fall flat on their faces in stunning defeats where Federal forces greatly outman and outgun their adversaries. West of the Appalachian Mountains, it is a different story. The enormously superior resources of the Union overpower what the Confederacy can put in the field. So far removed from Richmond, the Confederate commanders are often given second-class status by their leadership, denied supplies and manpower adequate to hold the Federal armies away. For much of the war, both sides are concerned with a game of capture the flag, as though by either capturing or preserving.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?